Welcome to today's deep dive. We're jumping into something today that I think is, well, it's pretty counterintuitive.
Yeah, it really goes against how most of us think about our daily routines.
Exactly. So I'm really glad you're joining us today. We are looking at James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. Specifically, we are zeroing in on chapter 8,
Right.
because the core concept there is all about the mechanics of making a habit absolutely irresistible.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to basically extract that concept and translate it into simple, actionable steps that you can use literally the minute you finish listening today.
Which is great because this chapter is really pivotal. It shifts the entire focus away from sheer discipline.
Thank goodness.
Right. It takes the pressure off. It looks directly at the biological and psychological engines of human desire. Clear is essentially arguing that if you want a behavior to stick long term, you cannot rely on willpower. You have to understand how to engineer anticipation.
That concept of anticipation is so fascinating because it completely reframes how we traditionally think about motivation. I mean, normally we operate under this assumption that the reward itself is what drives us to do things.
Yeah, the traditional view, like you eat a piece of cake because the cake tastes good.
Right. Or you go for a run because you enjoy that runner's high afterward. But Clear highlights this fascinating truth. Our motivation to act is heavily driven by the anticipation of the reward rather than the actual fulfillment of it.
Which requires us to look at the broader system that he establishes early in the book. To understand why anticipation is so powerful, we have to look at the four-step feedback loop that governs literally every habit.
The cue, the craving, the response, and the reward.
Exactly. And from that loop, Clear derives his four laws of behavior change. So to build a solid good habit, you make the cue obvious. You make the craving attractive, you make the response easy, and you make the reward satisfying.
And today is all about that second law.
Yes. Chapter 8 is entirely dedicated to the curbing phase. The second law is simply make it attractive.
Make it attractive, which it sounds almost deceptively simple on the surface, like a marketing slogan or something.
It does. But he grounds this law in the neurological reality of how our brains actually process desire, specifically through the dopamine-driven feedback loop.
Right, and this was the huge aha moment for me, the source material. We usually associate dopamine spikes directly with the reward itself, the moment you eat the cake or the moment you get handed your paycheck. But the crucial insight here is that the true dopamine spike happens during the anticipation phase.
The timing of that neurochemical release is everything. When you anticipate an opportunity for a reward, your dopamine levels just spike in preparation. And it is that exact spike in dopamine that creates the motivation to take action in the first place.
So the biological reality is that the desire initiates the behavior.
Exactly. If we connect this to the broader human experience, it explains a lot about our daily friction. With craving, we are dissatisfied, but we're incredibly driven. Without craving, we might be satisfied, but we lack the ambition to do anything new.
Which just totally upends the traditional reward model.
Right.
We've always been told that the prize at the end of the maze is what keeps the mouse running.
Right.
But Clear is pointing out that the expectation of the prize is actually doing all the heavy lifting. The greater the anticipation, the greater the dopamine spike. It's the reason why looking forward to a vacation often feels way more exciting than the actual vacation itself.
Because your brain is rewarding you for recognizing the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that neurological expectation is precisely what we need to harness if we want to build lasting habits. If you want to increase the odds that a behavior will actually occur, you have to make it attractive enough to trigger that anticipatory dopamine spike. You have to actively engineer your environment so that the craving pulls you toward the action.
And to illustrate how incredibly powerful that biological pull can be, Clear brings in this amazing piece of evolutionary biology. He tells the story of this Dutch scientist named Nico Tinbergen.
Who actually won a Nobel Prize.
Did you really?
Yeah, for his behavioral experiments in the 1940s.
Wow, okay. So Tinbergen was studying the feeding behaviors of herring gulls. He was observing how newly hatched chicks interacted with their parents.
And the methodology of his experiment perfectly captures how easily our biological instincts can be manipulated. So he noticed this very specific trigger. Adult herring gulls have a distinct red dot on their beaks.
To the little red spot.
Yeah, and when the chicks were hungry, they would instinctively peck at that red spot, which then prompted the parent to regurgitate food. So it was this perfect, closed biological loop.
A completely natural mechanism. But Tinbergen decided to test the limits of that instinct. So get this. He goes into his workshop and manufactures a series of highly artificial dummy beaks.
Out of cardboard.
Literally, fake gull heads made of cardboard, complete with these exaggerated giant red dots. And he presents these obvious, disembodied cardboard beaks to the chicks while the parents are away.
And from a purely logical standpoint, you would expect the chicks to completely ignore the cardboard. I mean, it doesn't look like a real bird. It doesn't move like a real bird.
It's certainly not their mother.
Right.
Yet the chicks didn't just accept the cardboard beaks. They vastly preferred them.
They loved them.
They pecked at the exaggerated red dots on the fake cardboard so enthusiastically. They completely abandoned their natural instinct for the real thing. Tinbergen actually found that the larger he made the red dot on the cardboard, the more intensely the chicks would react.
And this phenomenon has a name in science. It's known as a supernormal stimulus.
A supernormal stimulus.
Yeah. It is a heightened, exaggerated version of reality. It takes a natural evolutionary trigger, like the red dot that signifies food, and it amplifies it to a degree that nature never intended. So the cardboard beak was essentially a super beak.
A super beak.
Exactly. It bypassed the chick's logical recognition and directly hijacked their neurological reward system.
It hacked their brains by offering this irresistible, exaggerated cue. And Clear uses this experiment to make such a profound point about human behavior, because we are living in a modern environment that is absolutely saturated with supernormal stimuli.
Oh, what, please?
Our natural instincts are just constantly being hijacked by these highly engineered, exaggerated versions of reality.
The parallels are unavoidable. I mean, human beings evolved in an environment where calories were scarce. So our brains are naturally wired to crave salt, sugar, and fat. That was a vital survival mechanism.
Right. You needed that to survive.
But today, the modern food industry has taken those natural cravings and created the equivalent of the cardboard beak.
Processed junk food.
Processed junk food is a supernormal stimulus. It hits our palate with a concentration of salt and sugar that simply does not exist in the natural world, which triggers a massive, unnatural dopamine spike.
And it goes way beyond just food, too.
Yeah.
Social media algorithms are heavily engineered supernormal stimuli for our natural desire for social connection and approval.
Absolutely.
Video games are supernormal stimuli for our natural drive to overcome challenges and achieve mastery. We are surrounded by these highly attractive, highly exaggerated triggers that easily overpower our natural mundane behaviors.
Which brings us to the core friction of building good habits. When you are trying to establish a healthy routine, say reading a book, going for a walk, doing focused work, you are competing against an environment that is optimized for supernormal stimuli.
The good habit often feels boring by comparison.
Because it lacks that exaggerated dopamine spike. So the question becomes, how do we compete with that?
Right, because we clearly can't turn every single productive habit into a literal supernormal stimulus. You cannot make organizing your email inbox as neurologically thrilling as playing a highly engaging video game.
No, definitely not.
But Clear suggests we can use the exact same psychology to artificially inflate the appeal of the things we need to do. We can basically engineer a heightened version of our own desired reality.
This is where the theoretical biology translates into practical application. Clear introduces a framework designed to mimic this effect in our daily lives, which he calls temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. That is the primary actionable tool of Chapter 8. The strategy is to systematically pair an action that you want to do with an action that you need to do.
You're essentially taking a behavior that already produces a reliable dopamine spike and using it as a biological engine. You use it to pull you through a behavior that doesn't naturally have that spike.
You are creating a psychological bridge, linking the mandatory, often tedious task to a highly desirable, immediately rewarding activity. And over time, the anticipation of the want transfers to the need.
But to make this strategy structurally sound, Clear doesn't just suggest doing these two things loosely at the same time. He introduces a highly specific super formula. He combines temptation bundling with a concept from an earlier chapter known as habit stacking.
Right, and habit stacking, just as a brief refresher, is the process of anchoring a new behavior to an existing automatic routine you already perform every single day.
You take advantage of the momentum of a firmly established habit to initiate the new one.
So by merging habit stacking with temptation bundling, you create this robust three-part architectural rule for your daily behavior. The formula works like this. Step 1 is the habit stack. After my current habit, I will do the habit I need. Step 2 is the temptation bundle. After the habit I need, I will do the habit I want.
It creates an inescapable sequence. The automatic behavior triggers the required behavior, and completing the required behavior immediately unlocks the desired behavior, The want acts as the reward for the need.
The text provides a very clean, real-world example of how to build this stack. Let's walk through it because I want to make sure this is simple and actionable for you listening today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say your goal is that you want to read the daily news or check your favorite blogs. That is the want, the high dopamine activity.
Mm-hmm.
But you also know you need to cultivate a practice of expressing gratitude, which is the need, the low dopamine activity that often gets pushed aside.
Yeah, that is a classic friction point. The long-term beneficial behavior is constantly overridden by the desire for immediate gratification.
Exactly. And here's how the super formula resolves this. You start with the current habit, let's say drinking your morning coffee.
Yeah.
So, step 1. After I get my morning coffee, I will say one thing I'm grateful for that happened yesterday.
That is the habit stack. You are using the momentum of the coffee routine to pull you into the gratitude practice.
And then the temptation bundle secures the completion of the stack. Step 2. After I say one thing I'm grateful for, I will read the news.
Coffee gratitude news.
Current habit, habit I need, habit I want. By engineering this specific sequence, you have artificially heightened the appeal of the gratitude practice. On its own, stating what you are thankful for might lack urgency. But by locking it directly in front of the activity you actively crave, you make the need far more attractive.
The anticipation of reading the news pulls you actively through the gratitude practice. You aren't forcing yourself to stop everything and do a difficult task. You are simply placing the difficult task on the pathway to the reward.
Yes.
And this distinction is critical because it addresses the profound limitation of willpower.
Claire is very explicit about the fact that self-control is merely a short-term strategy. You might be able to summon the discipline to do the hard thing once or twice through sheer grit, but you cannot muster the willpower to override your biological desires every single time you face a choice.
Relying on discipline is an inherently fragile system. It is fragile because willpower is finite, whereas your environment and your biological drives are constant. If you are constantly fighting your environment, you will eventually lose.
Right.
Instead of trying to summon a new dose of motivation whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy is vastly better spent optimizing the routine itself. Temptation bundling optimizes the routine so that doing the right thing becomes the most appealing option available.
That transition from trying harder to designing better points to the overarching philosophy of the entire book. There is a quote from Clear that captures this perfectly, and it is arguably the central thesis of his work. Quote, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." Unquote.
You fall to the level of your systems. It completely shifts the paradigm of self-improvement. We are socially conditioned to fixate on distant, ambitious goals. We tell ourselves that if we just want it badly enough, if we just focus on the goal, we will change our behavior.
But Clear argues that bad habits repeat themselves not because you lack the desire to change, but because you have the wrong system for change.
The goal is just the desired outcome, but the system is the actual process that gets you there.
And this brings us to the very title of the book, Atomic Habits. It is very common to assume the word atomic simply refers to something tiny. We think of an atomic habit as a microscopic 1% improvement. And while small changes are part of it, Clear highlights a much more structural definition.
Yeah, an atom is fundamentally an irreducible unit of a larger system. Just as atoms combine to build molecules and molecules build complex structures, atomic habits are the fundamental building blocks of remarkable results. They are the individual components that make up your overall behavioral system.
So when you apply a tool like temptation bundling to make a habit attractive, you are operating at that atomic level. You aren't just crossing your fingers, relying on a burst of motivation and hoping you'll achieve your goal. You are acting as an architect. You're looking at the molecular structure of your daily routine and actively redesigning it.
You are intentionally rigging the environment in your own favor. If you are struggling to build a habit, the framework of Chapter 8 suggests that the problem isn't a lack of character or some moral failing. The problem is simply a design flaw in your system.
Right.
You haven't made the cue obvious, or in this case, you haven't made the craving attractive enough to generate that anticipatory dopamine spike.
Which removes so much of the guilt and self-judgment from the process of habit formation. If a habit isn't sticking, you don't need to berate yourself for being lazy. You just need to troubleshoot the system. You need to look at your routine and figure out how to pair that difficult task with a more immediate guaranteed reward.
It is a highly analytical approach to human nature. We acknowledge that our brains are wired to chase supernormal stimuli and immediate gratification. Rather than fighting that biology, we harness it. We use the inevitable pull of our wants to ensure the consistent execution of our needs.
To bring all these concepts together for you as you move forward with your day, we've explored a powerful sequence of ideas from Chapter 8. We started with the biological reality that the secret engine of motivation is actually anticipation. The dopamine spike occurs before we ever receive the reward driving us to take action.
We then looked at the evolutionary quirk demonstrated by Nico Tinbergen's herring gulls, where fake cardboard beaks proved how easily our natural instincts can be hijacked by exaggerated supernormal stimuli. And we discussed how modern society is filled with these highly engineered temptations that easily overpower our mundane good habits.
And most importantly, we broke down the structural framework of temptation bundling combined with habit stacking. We explored how to strategically sequence your current habits, your necessary habits, and your desired habits, creating a domino effect that artificially heightens the appeal of doing the right thing.
Which ultimately liberates you from the exhausting cycle of relying on finite willpower. It allows you to shift from merely setting goals to actively designing an architectural system, a system where you can comfortably fall to the level of your own excellent preparation.
It is an incredibly practical blueprint for daily behavior. But before we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you navigate your own routines today.
Since we now understand how supernormal stimuli can effortlessly trick our brains into taking action, take a hard look around your own living room, your smartphone, or your workspace today. What is a modern-day fake cardboard beak in your environment? A highly engineered temptation that is currently triggering one of your bad habits without you even realizing it? And more importantly, how can you hijack that exact same trigger tomorrow, bundle it, and use it as the biological engine to spark a habit you actually want?
That is the ultimate architectural challenge for you today. Find your cardboard beak and put it to work for your own system. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into making habits irresistible. We hope you take these tools and start bundling your temptations immediately. Keep redesigning your systems, and we will see you next time.